Hafsa radiallahu ta'ala anha passed away, and this is really, a blessing to him. Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he moves into the house of Hafsa. What is the house of Hafsa? Hafsa, her house is the house where the Quran was gathered. Right? The Quran was collected in the house of Hafsa. That's the house of the Prophet ﷺ. And he moves into that house, and so he lives now in the hujurat of the Prophet ﷺ. He lives right next to the masjid. So he goes to the masjid, he does his thing, and I mean, you can imagine what that meant to his heart. As much as he loved the Prophet ﷺ, now he's living in the house of the Prophet ﷺ where the Quran was gathered in. So he just stays there and he stays away from it all. He spreads ahadith, he teaches the ahadith of the Prophet ﷺ. He acts upon the sunnah that was documented. And Nafi' says that for 60 years after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, he never missed a hajj. So that's 60 hajjs under his belt, 60 years, he never missed hajj. And he would go to hajj and he would teach the people, he would answer, he would teach them the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. Now what happens after that? Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, I know I'm getting late, I'm going to try to finish on time. Inshallah ta'ala, finish on time. But this is important from a legacy perspective. Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, he had a dream. He said, ألا ليت شعري من هذا الفتى من نسلي الذي يملأ الأرض عدلا بعد أن ملئت جورا. يا ليت شعري من هذا الفتى من نسلي الذي يملأ الأرض عدلا بعد أن ملئت جورا. Umar ibn al-Khattab saw that dream where he said, who is this person that is going to fill the earth with justice? This person from my descendants that will fill the earth with justice after it has been filled with injustice. And they said, who is it, Ya Umar? He said, he's Dushiri, he has a scar on his face. He's someone from my descendants and he has a scar on his face. So again, they thought that it was Bilal ibn Abdullah. Who was it instead? It was Omar ibn Abdul Aziz, rahimahullah ta'ala. Omar ibn Abdul Aziz, he's born in Medina, and from a very young age, who does he have an attachment to? Abdullah ibn Umar, his uncle. And he used to go and he used to sit next to Abdullah ibn Umar, and he would sit, if Ibn Umar was crossing his arms, he would cross his arms. And if Ibn Umar crossed his legs, he would cross his legs. And when Ibn Umar walked, he would walk behind him, just like Ibn Umar walked behind the Prophet ﷺ and tried to imitate the Prophet ﷺ. And from an age of just 5 years old, he used to say to his mother that, I want to be just like my uncle. And أحب أن أكون مثل خالي. I want to be just like my uncle. And she would laugh and she would say, you want to be like Ibn Umar? You want to be like, because she didn't realize how great this son is going to be. Like, you want to be like Abdullah ibn Umar? And so every single time he saw Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu would signal to him to come with his hand when he was a child, and he would sit next to Abdullah ibn Umar. And he would even make faces like him. So if Ibn Umar showed, he did this, he would do that, and if he made a face, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz would make that face. Now, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, his father, Abdul Aziz, was appointed as the governor of Egypt. So he was going to move to Egypt with his father. Abdullah ibn Umar comes to the parents of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, and he says, leave him with me. And he says to him, and subhanAllah, this is wallahi firasatul mu'min. This is the insight of a believer, the way that a believer can see things. He says, فَوَاللَّهِ إِنِّي أَرَى فِي سِمَاءُ الصَّالِحِينَ وَإِنَّهُ يُذَكِّرُنِي بِأَبِي. I can just see in his face righteousness, and he reminds me of my father. So leave him back, we'll take care of him. And so Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, in his old age, invests his time in these young students of knowledge, particularly Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. And subhanAllah, look at how the sunnah is passed on. Anas ibn Malik radiallahu ta'ala anhu, Anas, who lived perhaps the longest of all of the companions. Anas ibn Malik said, I've never seen anyone whose salah resembles the salah of the Prophet ﷺ like Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. How did that happen? Rasulullah ﷺ, Abdullah ibn Umar, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, rahimahullah ta'ala. Now, the political part of this, and to end this discussion. Now, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz and his family, actually, they have a lot of friction with Al-Hajjaj. Al-Hajjaj is someone that you're going to learn a lot about tomorrow when we talk about Abdullah ibn Zubayr. Al-Hajjaj is one of the greatest tyrants that this ummah has ever seen. Rasulullah ﷺ mentioned a tyrant from Al-Thaqif, that would arise and that would wreak havoc on this ummah. Al-Hajjaj is that man. Hajjaj is someone that killed many innocent people. And subhanAllah, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz particularly hated Al-Hajjaj. Right? And when he became governor of Medina, he prevented him from entering into Medina. He prevented him in every way. I mean, he constantly had conflict with Al-Hajjaj in every way possible. Likewise, Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu did have friction with Al-Hajjaj. Hajjaj is the one that's sent to besiege Mecca and Medina now. Okay, this is before Umar ibn Abdul Aziz would grow up and become a governor. Hajjaj was sent to besiege Mecca and Medina because Mecca and Medina were under the control of Abdullah ibn Zubayr, and we'll talk about that tomorrow in detail, inshallah ta'ala. Now, when that happened, Sa'id ibn Jubayr says, a group of people went to Abdullah ibn Umar and they said to him, Ya Aba Abdurrahman, doesn't Allah say in the Quran to fight them حَتَّى لَا تَكُونَ فِتْنَةً until there is no more fitna? Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he said, ثَقِلَتْكَ أُمُّكَ, may your mother lose you. He said, that's an ayah that was revealed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to establish the deen, to establish religion, so that the deen could be for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to fight against the enemies of Islam. Not for people fighting over who rules, right? Who's going to rule who's going to run the Muslim government. He said that has nothing to do with this. And he said that the worst people, this is very interesting. He said the worst people are the Khawarij. The Khawarij are those, again, we talked about them from Ibn Abbas, that would just do takfir of everyone. He said they're the worst people. He said they take the ayat that Allah revealed about the enemies of Islam and they apply them to Muslims. That's their problem. That's exactly what they were doing. They were taking ayat about the enemies and they were applying them to their next door neighbor and their brother and their sister. So he said, those are the worst people. So Ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he said, leave me out of this. I don't want anything to do with this. Right? He morally supported Ibn Zubayr. He morally supported Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu anhu. He spoke well of Abdullah ibn Zubayr. He prayed behind Abdullah ibn Zubayr, but he didn't get involved in the political strife or in the fighting. And subhanAllah, he said that, he has a very powerful statement, kind of just illustrates his methodology, in summary of his manhaj, of his methodology in this regard. He says, if I hear Hayya ala salah, I will come. If someone says, come to prayer, I will come. Because he was criticized. They say, you pray with Yazid, you'll pray with Abdullah ibn Zubayr. Salah, wherever Abdullah ibn Umar was in the world, when salah time came, he didn't care what side anyone was on. He went and he prayed with them. So he said, you pray with everyone. Why are you praying with them? So he said, when I hear Hayya ala salah, I will come. Come to the prayer, I will come. When I hear Hayya ala falah, I will come. Come to success, I will come. When I say, come to kill your brother, I will reject that call. No matter who's making that call. It's not happening. Instead, what he did was, what he ends up doing is, subhanAllah, he from an ideological perspective, he kind of dismantles these groups ideologically. So there was a group that arose at that time called Al-Qadariyah, those who denied divine decree. They said there is no such thing as Allah knowing what's going to happen tomorrow and so on and so forth. So Abdullah ibn Umar, he argues against Al-Qadariyah. He kind of deals with things on the theological and the ideological side. And he condemns people for going to extremes. And there's a narration that he received a letter, that a man came to him from Iraq, and this is actually narrated in Al-Fath al-Bari. A man came to him from Iraq. Now Iraq, again, they were the people in Iraq, the group of people that we're talking about, they betrayed Al-Husayn radiallahu ta'ala anhu. So this man came to him and he said, what's the hukum, what's the ruling on a mosquito's blood if it gets on your garments? Is it permissible, is it halal to pray if you get mosquito blood on your shirt? Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, he stood up and he was outraged. He says, look at these people. He said they killed the grandson of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and shed his blood, and they're asking about the blood of a mosquito? Like, what is wrong with you people? Right? And that's the thing. He condemns these backward ideologies, these extremes that people went to. He condemns that over and over and over again. Lastly, to get to his death and what happens at the time of his death. Now, his death, at the end of his life now, he's actually 86 years old. So he's the last living Sahabi in Mecca, according to many historians. He lived past the assassination of Abdullah ibn Zubayr radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And when Abdullah ibn Zubayr was assassinated, Al-Hajjaj obviously did very nasty things and to the people of Mecca and so on and so forth. Abdullah ibn Umar, he did Hajj that year. And he spoke out against Al-Hajjaj. Alright, so he spoke out very clearly against Al-Hajjaj because again, he supported Ibn Zubayr morally, but he didn't get into the fighting part. So Al-Hajjaj stood up one day and he started to give a khutbah. And he's giving a long khutbah. And he's cursing Ali radiallahu anhu, he's cursing companions. I mean, he's saying terrible, terrible things. And he's cursing Ibn Zubayr and so on and so forth, desecrating the names of the companions. And Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, he stands up and he says, Ya adu wallah, you enemy of Allah, istahlalta haram Allah wa kharrabta bayt Allah. You know, you attacked the Kaaba, the precincts of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You ruined this place. And he says, Aqim as-salah, la nuridu nasma'ak. Just hurry up and do the salah. We don't want to hear anything you have to say. So when Ibn Umar finally said that, what does that do to everyone's like, whoa. Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu is not tolerating Al-Hajjaj anymore. He's an old man, and at this point some narrations say he's blind. I mean, he's 86 years old. Ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, there's not much left for him. He just says to him, just be quiet and do the salah. We don't want to hear these words of yours. Al-Hajjaj, he says to him, Ya Sheikh qad kharif, that you've gone senile, O old man. So he responds back to him in a nasty way. And what Al-Hajjaj does is Al-Hajjaj actually has someone during Rami al-Jamarat, during the stoning, he has someone poison Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu. So Ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu was struck with poison, and he didn't tell anyone that it was him. But he recognized now that Ibn Umar was delegitimizing him now. So he had him poisoned. And the thing about this is that Ibn Umar actually asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to die that year after Hajj. SubhanAllah. So it's an answered dua for him as far as he's concerned. I mean, he had nothing left to live for. Right? He's taught, he's lived for a very long time. He just wants to die now after this Hajj. So while he is on his deathbed, Al-Hajjaj comes to visit him. And he asks him, he talks to him like he has nothing to do with it. So he says to Ibn Umar, he says, Kayfa huwa, how are you doing? How is everything? Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu said, Salihun, alhamdulillah. We're doing good, alhamdulillah, rabbil alameen. And he says, Waman asabak? Who hit you? Who struck you? Who do you think it was? So Ibn Umar radiallahu, and this is actually in Bukhari, this narration is actually in Al-Bukhari. قال من أمر بحمل السلاح في يوم لا يحل فيه حمله. The one who authorized people to carry weapons on a day that it is haram to carry weapons, and in a place that it is haram to carry weapons. Meaning you. Alright? So Al-Hajjaj is shocked, and he gets up and he walks away. And subhanAllah, Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu is dying. There are a few things that he says. He says, number one, he says, ما أساء على الدنيا من شيء إلا على ثلاث. That I'm not sad about anything in this world except for three things. Okay? Did I miss something? I'm sorry. Okay. I'm not sad about this dunya except for three things. Okay? And he says, the first one, على ظمأ الهواجر ومكابدة الليل وأني لم أقاتل. Three things that I regret. He said, number one, the inadequacy of my thirst in the afternoon. ظمأ الهواجر, he means that I'm going to miss fasting. I'm going to miss my days of fasting. And he said, my standing up at night in tahajjud. I'm going to miss my fasting. I'm going to miss my tahajjud. And he said the third thing, وَأَنِّي لَمْ أُقَاتِلْ. I wish I would have fought. So he actually regretted as he was dying not taking the side of Ibn Zubayr or of Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu or so on and so forth, of not fighting against the oppressive army. So this is something significant that he says this as he's dying, that he actually expresses a regret that his silence perhaps went too far. And he's admitting that he shouldn't have stayed silent to the extent that he stayed silent. There's no doubt that there's an acceptable level of that, and leaving fitna is acceptable to an extent, but there is a point where he feels like he should have done something. And the last thing that he does is very, very, very peculiar. He calls his daughter. His daughter was engaged. Okay? Now an engagement in Islam is a promise. And he asks his daughter, he says, I have one request of you. And her name was Layla. He said, I have one request of you. He said, what is it? He said that you marry him today. And she said, why? He said, because I don't want to meet Allah with an unfulfilled promise. SubhanAllah, so on the day of, that's his wara', back again, his fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I don't want to meet Allah having a promise that was unfulfilled. The marriage was already set, the promise was made. I don't want to have anything on my plate that wasn't fulfilled before I meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So his daughter, actually, the nikah was done as Abdullah ibn Umar was leaving this world. Okay? And subhanAllah, so he dies at the age of 86 years old, 73 years after Hijrah. And he is the last Sahabi in Mecca. Sa'id ibn Jubayr radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he said when Ibn Umar left this world, he was the best man alive on the face of the earth. There was no one else on the face of the earth that could be compared to him in terms of virtue. His legacy, now through Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, through Nafi' now is the teacher of Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala. Imam Malik would basically take all of the opinions, all of his fiqh for the most part is from Abdullah ibn Umar. So the Maliki school of thought, the madhab of Imam Malik is practically Abdullah ibn Umar's opinions through Nafi'. I mean, it's a beautiful direct link between him and Malik. So in fiqh, this is as great of a legacy as it gets. In hadith, how many ahadith did we say he narrated? 2,630 or 2,063? 630, okay. Over 2,630 ahadith. As far as, subhanAllah, in hadith, there's something, one more thing I want to leave you guys with. There's something in hadith called Al-Silsila al-Dhahabiyya, the golden chain of hadith. The golden chain of hadith is what Al-Imam al-Bukhari calls the best chain of hadith. Meaning if you have this chain of hadith, you don't ask any questions. The hadith is Imam Malik narrates from Nafi', who narrates from Abdullah ibn Umar, who narrates from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There are 80 ahadith like that. Al-Bukhari says there is no hadith that's more authentic than that. It doesn't get purer than that. Because the way Abdullah ibn Umar followed Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it doesn't get purer than that. And the way Nafi' studied with Ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, it doesn't get purer than that. And the love that Imam Malik had for the family of Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu ta'ala anhu and his opinions and his methodology, it doesn't get purer than that. Some of the Shafi'is, they said actually a Silsila al-Dhahabiyya is when a Shafi'i narrates from Malik, who narrates from... So it still counts as the same thing. It's still part of a Silsila al-Dhahabiyya. But that's his legacy. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be pleased with him and his father and to be pleased with his family. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make my son like him. Everyone say Ameen for me, please. And to make us all righteous and to make us all like the companions and to join us with the companions and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his family in Jannat al-Firdaus. Allahumma Ameen. Sorry I went over time. I just didn't want to cut this off.